When we say that time is a dimension rather than a flowing river, we are challenging one of the deepest intuitions the human mind has ever formed. From childhood, we learn to think of time as something that moves. We imagine it like a stream carrying us from yesterday into today, and then pushing us relentlessly into tomorrow. Our language reflects this belief. We say time passes, time flies, time runs out, time moves forward. Yet none of these expressions describe what physics actually finds when it examines reality at its most fundamental level. They describe how time feels, not how time is. In modern physics, especially since Einstein, time is treated as a dimension, similar in status to space. To understand what this means, imagine standing in a room. You can move left or right, forward or backward, up or down. These are spatial directions. All positions in that room exist at once, even though you only occupy one location at a time. You do not believe that the room is being created step by step as you walk through it. The room already exists as a whole, and your movement through it is a change in your position, not a change in the room's existence. Physics suggests that time works the same way. In spacetime, the universe is described as a four-dimensional structure, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. Every event has coordinates, not just where it happens, but when it happens. From this perspective, yesterday, today, and tomorrow are not stages being generated by some cosmic clock. They are locations, just as different cities are locations in space. The year you were born and the year you will die are points in the time dimension, already part of the overall structure. This idea feels almost offensive to common sense because common sense evolved to help us survive, not to understand the universe. Our brains are biological machines tuned to notice change, motion, and cause and effect within a narrow range of conditions. We experience change, so we infer flow. But change does not require time itself to flow. Change only requires differences between states at different time coordinates. Just as motion through space requires different positions at different spatial coordinates. One of the strongest reasons physicists reject the idea of time as something that flows is that there is no measurable speed of time. Everything that flows has a rate. A river flows at a certain speed. Blood flows through veins at a measurable pace. But time does not flow at 1 second per second in any meaningful physical sense. Saying that time flows at 1 second per second is not a measurement, it is a tautology. It tells us nothing about the world. Physics demands quantities that can be measured and compared, and the flow of time has no such quantity. More importantly, the equations that describe the fundamental laws of nature do not include a moving present. When physicists write down equations for gravity, electromagnetism, or quantum mechanics, time appears as a coordinate, not as an entity that advances. The equations work just as well if time is treated like another dimension. There is no variable in the equations that says, "No, move everything forward." Einstein's relativity makes this unavoidable. According to special relativity, time and space are intertwined. The separation between two events depends on how fast you are moving. Two observers in relative motion will disagree on the time interval between the same events, and even on whether they occurred simultaneously. This alone destroys the idea of a universal flow of time. If time were flowing uniformly for the entire universe, there would have to be a single cosmic present moment sweeping forward. Relativity shows that such a present does not exist. Instead, each observer has their own slice of spacetime they call now, and these slices differ from one observer to another. This is not a matter of illusion or measurement error, it is built into the structure of reality. Once this is accepted, the idea of time flowing objectively becomes extremely difficult to defend. Flow implies a global process, but physics allows no global clock. When physicists and philosophers say time is a dimension, they are not saying that time feels like space. Clearly, it does not. You can choose where to go in space, but you cannot choose to go to tomorrow or return to yesterday. However, this difference does not prove that time flows. It only proves that the geometry of spacetime is different from the geometry of space alone. The rules for movement are not the same in all dimensions, but that does not mean one of them is flowing. The sensation of flow comes from how our brains operate. The brain is a system that processes information sequentially. It stores records of certain events in memory, creating what we call the past. It anticipates events it has no records of, which we call the future. At any moment, it integrates sensory input and memory into a coherent experience we label the present. This process creates a powerful narrative of motion through time, even if no such motion exists outside the brain. Consider a flipbook animation. When you flip the pages, you see motion. The character appears to move. But nothing on the pages themselves is moving. All the drawings exist simultaneously. The motion is an effect created by how the images are revealed to you. In the same way, the brain reveals different slices of space-time to consciousness, creating the impression of time passing. If time is a dimension, then the future already exists in the same sense that distant galaxies exist. You have not been there yet, but their existence does not depend on your arrival. This does not mean the future is predetermined in a mystical sense. It means that the structure of reality includes events we label future because of our position within it. Determinism and the block universe are related but not identical ideas. Even in a universe with randomness or quantum uncertainty, the overall spacetime structure can still exist as a whole. The idea that time does not flow also clarifies a long-standing confusion about the present moment. We tend to think the present is something physically special, the only moment that truly exists. But physics finds no evidence for this special status. The present is special to us because that is where our consciousness is located, not because the universe privileges it. When we say now, we are pointing to a feature of our experience, not a feature of space-time. This distinction is crucial. Many paradoxes about time arise because we project features of human consciousness onto the universe itself. Once we separate experience from structure, those paradoxes dissolve. Seeing time as a dimension also changes how we think about beginnings and endings. If time does not flow, the universe is not continuously being created from nothing. Its history exists as a complete four-dimensional object. The Big Bang is not the moment when time started flowing, it is a boundary or region within spacetime. Birth and death are not entrances and exits from existence. They are locations marking where a particular world line begins and ends. This view can feel cold at first, as if it drains life of drama. But in many ways it does the opposite. It removes the anxiety that comes from imagining time as an unstoppable force erasing moments as it passes. If time does not flow, nothing is being erased. Moments are not destroyed by the arrival of new ones. Every experience you have ever had remains part of the structure of reality. Understanding time as a dimension forces us to accept that reality is far less centered on human intuition than we would like. The universe is not built to match how things feel. It is built according to deep, consistent principles that only reveal themselves through careful reasoning and experiment. The feeling of time passing is real as an experience, but it is not evidence of a flowing time any more than the feeling that the sun moves across the sky is evidence that the earth is stationary. When you let go of the image of time as a river, a different picture emerges. Reality becomes a vast, silent spacetime landscape. You are not being carried forward by time. You are a path within that landscape, a sequence of events connected by memory, causality, and consciousness. The motion you feel is not the motion of the universe. It is the motion of awareness tracing a route through something that is already whole. This is the first step toward understanding how the future can already exist without robbing the present of meaning. Time does not push us forward. We are not racing against it. We are simply located where we are, in a dimension that does not move at all, even though it feels as if it does. If time is truly a dimension and not a flowing substance, then many of the assumptions we carry about life, urgency, and change begin to quietly fall apart. The mind resists this at first because the idea of a static time dimension seems to contradict everything we live through. We wake up, we age, We see clocks advance, seasons change, and people come and go. But none of these observations require time itself to move. They only require that different events exist at different locations along the time dimension, just as different objects exist at different locations in space. To see this more clearly, imagine a long road stretching across a landscape. Along this road are milestones marking different distances. The road does not move. The milestones do not move. Yet if you are walking along it, your experience is one of progression. You feel as though you are advancing, leaving some milestones behind and approaching others. The sense of motion belongs to you, not to the road. In the same way, spacetime does not advance. We do not move because time flows. We move because our physical and mental states are ordered along the time dimension in a particular way. Physics supports this interpretation because nowhere in its most successful theories is there a mechanism that generates a moving present. There is no equation that says the universe updates itself frame by frame. Instead, the equations describe relationships between events. They describe how one event is connected to another, not how reality itself is refreshed. The universe, according to these equations, does not need to be continuously noified to exist. This becomes even clearer when we examine relativity more closely. In Einstein's framework, time and space are fused into spacetime, and different observers carve this spacetime into slices of past, present, and future in different ways. What one observer considers simultaneous events, another observer moving at a different speed will not. If time were flowing, there would need to be an objective present moment that everyone agrees on, but relativity shows that no such agreement is possible. This means that the flow of time cannot be a physical feature of the universe. It cannot be something happening out there independently of observers, because different observers would then have to detect different flows, which leads to contradictions. The only consistent conclusion is that the flow is not in the universe at all. It is in the way observers experience the universe. The brain is a system that exists entirely within spacetime. It does not hover outside time watching it go by. It is a chain of physical processes, each one causing the next. Neurons fire, chemicals are released, memories are formed. Each of these processes is located at a specific time coordinate. The brain never experiences all of spacetime at once. It only has access to a narrow slice, which creates the impression of a moving window. This moving window is what we call the present. But the present is not a thing. It is not a location marked in red on the fabric of the universe. It is simply the set of events that are currently interacting with the brain. As the brain state changes, the set of events it interacts with changes, and this is experienced as time passing. The illusion becomes even stronger because memory only works in one direction. We carry records of earlier states but not of later ones. This asymmetry is crucial. If you could remember the future as clearly as the past, the sense of flow would collapse. You would see your life laid out all at once, like a map, rather than as a journey. The fact that memory points backward creates the powerful narrative of movement. Entropy reinforces this narrative. The universe began in a very low entropy state, and entropy has been increasing ever since. This increase leaves traces, records, and correlations. Broken eggs do not reassemble themselves because that would require entropy to decrease. These irreversible processes provide the physical basis for memory and causation. But again, entropy does not require time to flow. It only requires that different regions of spacetime have different entropy values. A photograph of a broken glass tells you something about the past, not because time flowed, but because the physical configuration contains information about earlier states. The arrow of time emerges from these asymmetries, not from a moving temporal background. When people hear that time does not pass, they often worry that this makes life meaningless or mechanical. But meaning does not come from motion itself. Meaning comes from structure, relationships, and experience. A symphony does not need to be created note by note to be meaningful. The entire score can exist at once, and yet the experience of listening to it, moment by moment, remains rich and emotional. In the same way, your life can be fully laid out in spacetime and still be deeply meaningful. Each choice you make is part of the structure. Each emotion you feel is real at its location. The absence of a flowing time does not flatten experience, it explains it. Understanding time as a dimension also changes how we think about fear, especially the fear of the future. We often imagine the future as something rushing toward us, carrying uncertainty and loss. But if time does not flow, nothing is rushing. The future is not approaching you like a wave. It already has its place. You will encounter it not because it moves, but because you are part of a sequence of events, ordered along the time dimension. This perspective can reduce a great deal of existential anxiety. Aging, for example, feels like something being taken away by time. But in the dimensional view, youth is not erased by age. Both exist. Your childhood is not gone in the sense of being destroyed. It is simply located elsewhere in spacetime. It remains as real as this moment, even though you cannot access it. This does not mean that loss is an illusion. Relationships end, bodies change, lives have finite extents. But these facts do not require a flowing time that steals moments from us. They require only that different states exist at different times. The same applies to death. From within experience, death appears as a future event that will eventually arrive. From the spacetime perspective, it is a boundary to a world line. It does not rush toward you. It simply marks where certain experiences stop being part of that particular path. The rest of spacetime remains unchanged. Seeing time as a dimension also helps clarify why prediction and causation work without invoking flow. Causes precede effects not because time pushes causes into effects, but because of how events are ordered and connected in spacetime. One event lies in the light cone of another, meaning it can influence it according to the laws of physics. This structure is fixed. Nothing needs to move for causation to occur. In everyday life, we rely on the idea of time passing to plan, to motivate, and to coordinate. These practical uses remain valid even if the underlying picture is different. Just as sailors navigated using the apparent motion of the stars long before understanding celestial mechanics, we can continue to use clocks and calendars without believing that time itself flows. Clocks do not measure the flow of time. They measure change. They count regular physical processes, such as oscillations of atoms or the motion of gears. When we say time passes, what we really mean is that certain processes continue to occur in a regular order. The clock is not revealing a river of time. It is revealing the structure of change along the time dimension. Once this is understood, many philosophical puzzles lose their grip. Questions like, "Why is now special?" or "Why does the present keep updating?" turn out to be based on assumptions that physics does not support. The present is special only to conscious systems embedded in spacetime. It is not stamped onto the universe itself. Accepting that time does not flow is not about denying experience. It is about placing experience where it belongs. The feeling of passage is a feature of conscious processing, not a property of reality independent of observers. This does not diminish the feeling. It explains it. In the end, the idea that time is a dimension rather than a river invites a quieter, more stable view of existence. Reality is not racing forward. It is not running out. It is complete. We are not being carried along by time. We are patterns within spacetime, experiencing that structure from the inside. The world does not change because time moves. The world includes change as part of its shape, and the sense that something is passing is the story consciousness tells as it traces its path through a dimension that, at the deepest level, never moves at all. When we talk about the block universe and the coexistence of past, present, and future, we are stepping into a way of thinking that completely reverses how the human mind naturally organizes reality. We instinctively believe that the past is gone, the present is real, and the future is unreal. This belief feels so obvious that questioning it seems absurd. And yet, when physics describes the universe at its most fundamental level, this intuitive picture collapses. What replaces it is a far stranger and far more radical idea, All moments of time exist equally, side by side, within a single four-dimensional structure. The block universe is not a theory invented to sound mysterious. It is a direct consequence of taking modern physics seriously, especially relativity. Once time is treated as a dimension, it becomes impossible to justify why one moment should exist while another does not. In space, we do not say that only the place where you are standing exists, while distant places are unreal. New York does not pop into existence when you arrive there, nor does it vanish when you leave. It exists whether or not you are present. The block universe says the same is true for time. In this view, the universe is a complete object. It is not being assembled moment by moment. It is more like a sculpture than a performance. Every event that ever happens has a location in spacetime. The birth of a star, the fall of an empire, the moment you are reading these words, and events thousands of years from now all coexist within this structure. Nothing is waiting to happen. Nothing is coming into being. Everything already has its place. This idea feels disturbing because it clashes with our sense of becoming. We feel that the present is special, that it is the thin edge of reality where things actually happen. The past feels fixed and unreachable. The future feels open and undefined. But this sense of openness is psychological, not physical. It comes from our limited access to information, not from the structure of the universe itself. Relativity makes this clear in a very precise way. Different observers moving at different speeds do not agree on what events are happening right now. For one observer, an event might already have occurred. For another, that same event might still be in the future. If existence depended on being present, then the same event would have to both exist and not exist depending on who is looking at it. That is logically impossible. The only consistent conclusion is that the event exists regardless of whether any observer labels it past, present, or future. Once you accept this, the idea of coexistence becomes unavoidable. Past, present, and future are not categories of existence. They are categories of perspective. They describe how an observer is situated within spacetime, not which parts of spacetime are real. The block universe is often misunderstood as saying that everything is frozen or dead. This misunderstanding comes from imagining the block from an external point of view and forgetting that we are inside it. From the inside, events still happen, choices are still made, emotions are still felt, change is still experienced. What changes is not the experience, but the interpretation of what experience means. Imagine a long novel sitting on a shelf. The entire story exists at once, from the first page to the last. From outside the book, nothing is changing, but from inside the story, characters live through events, make decisions, and face consequences. The existence of the whole story does not make the experiences within it meaningless. It simply means that the story is a complete object. The block universe does the same thing to reality. It treats the universe as a completed narrative, not as a story being written in real time. This does not deny motion, causation, or experience. It places them within a larger structure. One of the most powerful implications of this view is that the past is not destroyed. When we say the past is gone, what we really mean is that we no longer have access to it. The events themselves are not erased. They remain part of spacetime, just as real as anything happening now. Your childhood still exists. Every conversation you ever had still exists. Those moments are not fading or decaying. They are simply not where you are. This can radically change how we think about loss. We often feel that time steals moments from us, that memories are all that remain of things that no longer exist. In the block universe, this metaphor is wrong. Nothing is stolen. Moments are not destroyed by the passage of time. They remain fixed in their place. Memory does not preserve them. Memory merely allows us to access information about them. The future in this picture is equally real. This does not mean it is known or predictable. Reality can be uncertain, probabilistic, and complex while still being fully existent. Quantum mechanics, for example, allows for indeterminacy at the level of events, but once those events occur, they are part of the block. Even in interpretations where multiple outcomes exist, all those outcomes coexist within a larger structure. The idea that the future exists often triggers fear about fate and inevitability. People worry that if the future is already there, then nothing can be changed. But this worry assumes that the future is something separate from us, something written independently of our actions. In the block universe, this separation does not exist. Your actions are not responses to a fixed future. They are part of the future's structure. The future includes you thinking, deciding, hesitating, and acting. There is no version of the future where your choices are missing. They are built into it. Saying the future exists is not the same as saying it is imposed. It is saying that the totality of events, including decision-making processes, is part of reality. This perspective also dissolves the sharp boundary we imagine between what has happened and what will happen. The distinction is real for us because we remember one and not the other. But memory is a biological function, not a cosmic principle. The universe does not remember. It simply is. Our brains evolved to navigate a narrow slice of spacetime efficiently. To do this, they generate a strong sense of now, a feeling of being located at the leading edge of time. This feeling is incredibly useful for survival. It allows us to react quickly, plan, and learn. But usefulness does not equal truth. The sense of a moving present is a cognitive construction layered on top of a static structure. In the block universe, there is no universal present sweeping forward. There are only different world lines, paths through spacetime taken by objects and observers. Along each world line, events are ordered in a particular way. This ordering creates the appearance of temporal direction without requiring temporal flow. Each person's life is one such world line. It has a beginning, a sequence of events, and an end. All of these exist together as part of spacetime. From the outside, it looks like a complete curve. From the inside, it feels like a journey. This duality between outside and inside perspectives is crucial. Many objections to the block universe come from confusing these perspectives. From the outside, nothing changes. From the inside, everything changes. Both descriptions are correct. They apply at different levels. The coexistence of all times also explains why the universe does not need a special mechanism to store the past or create the future. The universe does not remember its past any more than a mountain remembers its base. The structure simply includes different regions with different properties. This view also aligns with how physics treats conservation laws. Energy, momentum, and charge are conserved across spacetime, not updated moment by moment. The laws apply to the whole structure, not just the present slice. The block universe is the natural setting in which these laws make sense. Emotionally, this idea can be unsettling because it challenges the drama of becoming. We like to think of ourselves as moving towards something, escaping something, or leaving something behind. The block universe suggests a calmer, more neutral reality. Nothing is chasing us. Nothing is disappearing. Everything simply occupies its place. At the same time, this view can deepen meaning rather than diminish it. If moments are not erased, then nothing meaningful is ever lost to time. Every act of kindness, every insight, every experience remains part of reality forever. They do not vanish when the present moves on. Understanding coexistence also reframes regret and nostalgia. Regret often comes from imagining that the past is gone and irretrievable. Nostalgia comes from longing for something that no longer exists. In the block universe, the past still exists. What is gone is access, not reality. This does not eliminate emotion, but it can soften the sense of absolute loss. The block universe also removes the idea that the universe is unfinished or incomplete. There is no cosmic waiting room where future events are queued up, waiting to be born. There is no universal suspense. The universe is not anticipating anything. Anticipation belongs to conscious beings, not to spacetime itself. This idea requires a shift in identity. Instead of thinking of yourself as a being moving through time, you begin to see yourself as a four-dimensional entity extended in time as well as space. You are not just who you are now. You are the entire pattern of your life, from beginning to end, existing as a single structure. This does not reduce you to a static object. It expands you. You are not confined to a fleeting present. You are a whole timeline. The person you were, the person you are, and the person you will be are all equally real aspects of the same space-time entity. Once this shift is made, the coexistence of past, present, and future stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a description of completeness. Reality is not unfinished. It is not fragile. It is not slipping away. It is fully there, and we experience it in sequence because that is how conscious systems function within it. This is the heart of the block universe idea. Not that time is dead, but that time is already whole. Not that experience is meaningless, but that experience is embedded in a structure far larger and more stable than our intuitions suggest. And once this is understood, the idea that the future already exists no longer feels like a paradox. It feels like the natural consequence of a universe that does not need to be updated in order to be real. When the idea of the block universe is taken seriously all the way to its consequences, it begins to reshape not only physics but the way we interpret existence itself. The coexistence of past, present, and future is not just a technical claim about spacetime, it is a statement about what it means for something to be real. Reality, in this sense, is not something that grows or unfolds. It does not accumulate moments like beads on a string. It is already complete, even though we never experience it as such. The resistance to this idea comes largely from confusing reality with awareness. We assume that what is real must be what we can currently experience. But this assumption has never held in science. Most of the universe is already inaccessible to us, either because it is too far away, too small, or too distant in time. Yet we do not deny its existence simply because we cannot observe it directly. The block universe extends this logic to time itself. Inaccessibility does not equal non-existence. In everyday life, we treat the past as fixed and the future as open. This distinction feels profound, almost metaphysical, but when examined closely, it turns out to be practical rather than fundamental. The past feels fixed because it has left records. Memories, photographs, scars, documents, and physical traces all point backward. The future feels open because it has not yet left such records in our brains. But this asymmetry is a feature of information, not of existence. If a hypothetical being had access to all of spacetime at once, the distinction between past and future would vanish. That being would not see events as approaching or receding. It would see patterns, correlations, and structures spread across time, much like we see patterns spread across space. The universe itself is closer to this perspective than we are. It does not privilege one moment over another. One of the most misunderstood aspects of the block universe is the idea that it denies change. In fact, it does the opposite. Change is everywhere in the block universe. Stars ignite and burn out, civilizations rise and fall, bodies grow, age, and decay. What disappears is not change but becoming. Change is a relation between different time slices. Becoming is the idea that reality itself is transitioning from one state to another. Physics supports the former, not the latter. This distinction matters deeply. When we say something changes, we mean that it has different properties at different times. When we say reality becomes, we mean that only one time is real and that reality itself updates. The block universe rejects becoming while fully embracing change. The universe contains change as part of its structure rather than generating it dynamically. This helps explain why physics struggles whenever we try to insert a moving present into its equations. A moving present would be an extra ingredient, something over and above spacetime itself. It would require a second time dimension with respect to which time flows. But this leads to an infinite regress. If time flows, does the flow itself flow? Physics avoids this entirely by treating time as static and letting change arise from relations within that static structure. The coexistence of all times also sheds light on why attempts to define the present in physical terms always fail. There is no observable marker that distinguishes present events from non-present ones. No experiment can detect whether an event is happening now in an absolute sense. All experiments can detect are relationships between events, such as which can influence which. The absence of a detectable present is exactly what the block universe predicts. Once this is accepted, many traditional philosophical debates about time take on a different character. Questions like, why does the present move? Or, why does the future come into existence? Are revealed to be based on false premises. The present does not move. The future does not come into existence. What changes is the location of conscious awareness along a fixed structure. This brings us to the role of the observer. In the block universe, observers are not external witnesses to reality. They are features within it. Each observer traces a world line through spacetime, carrying information from earlier parts of that world line into later parts. This information transfer is what creates memory, anticipation, and the feeling of passage. From this perspective, consciousness is not something that floats above time watching it pass. It is something embedded in time, structured by it. Conscious states are ordered in a sequence along a world line, and this ordering is enough to generate the sensation of flow. No additional temporal motion is required. This insight also clarifies why the future feels uncertain even if it exists. Uncertainty is not about non-existence, it is about lack of information. You can be uncertain about the layout of a city you have never visited, even though the city already exists. In the same way, you can be uncertain about future events even if they are part of spacetime. Knowledge and existence are not the same thing. Probability fits naturally into this picture. Probabilities describe what an observer knows, not what exists. Even in a deterministic block universe, an observer inside the block may be ignorant of what lies ahead along their world line. That ignorance is real and meaningful. It guides decision-making, learning, and behavior. The existence of future events does not grant foreknowledge of them. This is why planning and effort still matter. When you plan for tomorrow, you are not attempting to create the future out of nothing. You are influencing which events occur along your world line and how they are connected to others. Those influences are part of the block. The fact that the block exists does not bypass the mechanisms through which outcomes arise. Another important consequence of coexistence is how it reframes moral responsibility. Responsibility depends on causation and intention, not on temporal flow. If an action causes harm, it does so because of its position and relations in spacetime, not because time carried it forward. Moral evaluation does not require the universe to be unfolding. It requires that actions be connected to consequences, and those connections remain intact in the block universe. In fact, some philosophers argue that the block universe strengthens responsibility. Since actions are permanently part of reality, they are not fleeting events that vanish as time passes. What you do is not washed away by the arrival of new moments. It remains a fixed feature of the spacetime structure. The coexistence of all times also changes how we think about endings. We often imagine the end of something as its disappearance from reality, but in the block universe, an ending is simply a boundary. A relationship ends at a certain point in spacetime. A life ends at another. These endings do not erase what came before. They mark where certain patterns stop extending. This can profoundly affect how we relate to grief. Grief is real and unavoidable. Loss is real from the perspective of experience. But the idea that what was shared no longer exists adds an extra layer of pain that physics does not support. The moments that mattered are not gone. They are not fragile memories fighting against time. They are fixed parts of reality. The same logic applies to fear of the future. We often fear the future as if it were an approaching force. But nothing approaches. The future does not move toward us any more than distant mountains move toward a traveler. What changes is our position. Fear, then, is not a response to an oncoming wave of time, but to uncertainty about what lies along our path. Understanding this does not eliminate fear, but it can soften its edge. It replaces the image of an aggressive future with a neutral landscape. What happens will happen not because time pushes it into existence, but because it is part of the structure that includes you and your actions. One of the most subtle shifts the block universe introduces is in how we think about progress. We often speak of humanity progressing through time, as if civilization itself is moving forward along a single trajectory. In the block universe, progress is not a motion of reality, but a pattern across time. Some regions of spacetime contain more knowledge, technology, or cooperation than others. These differences exist side by side in the block. This does not make progress illusory. It makes it structural. Progress is not something the universe does. It is something that happens within the universe at certain times and places. Recognizing this helps separate descriptive facts from emotional narratives. The coexistence of all times also aligns with how mathematics treats functions and curves. A mathematical curve exists as a whole, even though you may trace it point by point. The tracing is an activity, not a creation. The block universe treats reality more like a mathematical object than a process. This is one reason why mathematics is so effective at describing the universe. It naturally describes complete structures rather than unfolding stories. This perspective does not require us to abandon everyday language. We can still say, "The future will happen," and "the past is over" for practical purposes. These phrases are useful shortcuts, but understanding their deeper meaning prevents us from mistaking metaphor for mechanism. At its deepest level, the block universe is a claim about consistency. It is the simplest way to make sense of relativity, causation, and the absence of a universal present. It removes the need for special rules to explain why the present exists or how it moves. Everything is treated on equal footing, and perhaps most importantly, it invites humility. It reminds us that the universe is not built around human perception. The way reality feels is not necessarily the way reality is. Our experience of time is powerful, vivid, and meaningful, but it is not a guide to the universe's underlying structure. When all times coexist, reality becomes less frantic. There is no cosmic deadline, no universal ticking clock, no moment slipping away into nothingness. There is only a vast space-time structure containing every event, every choice, every experience. We live inside that structure, experiencing it from a narrow perspective that creates urgency, motion, and narrative. That perspective is not an error. It is what makes life possible. But it is not the whole truth. The block universe does not ask us to stop living as if things happen. It asks us to understand that happening is a feature of experience, not a process by which reality is assembled. Once this is seen, the coexistence of past, present, and future no longer feels abstract or threatening. It feels like the natural shape of a universe that does not need to hurry in order to exist. When relativity tells us that there is no universal now, it delivers one of the most unsettling messages science has ever produced. It does not merely say that time behaves strangely at high speeds or strong gravity. It says something far more radical. The idea that the entire universe shares a single present moment is false. The now you feel so vividly, the moment that seems to stand out as uniquely real, is not written into the fabric of reality. It is something local, personal, and observer-dependent. Before Einstein, it was easy to assume a universal present. Newtonian physics treated time as absolute, flowing uniformly everywhere, independent of motion or position. Under that picture, it made sense to believe that the universe updated itself simultaneously, like a cosmic clock ticking in unison for all observers. Everyone, everywhere, shared the same moment, even if light delays prevented them from knowing what was happening elsewhere. The present was hidden, but it was still assumed to exist. Relativity shattered this assumption completely. According to special relativity, simultaneity is not absolute. Two events that appear simultaneous to one observer may occur at different times for another observer, moving relative to the first. This is not a trick of measurement, not a limitation of instruments, and not an illusion caused by signal delays. It is a direct consequence of how spacetime is structured. To understand why this matters so deeply, Imagine two lightning strikes hitting the front and back of a train at the same time, according to an observer standing on the platform. For that observer, the strikes are simultaneous. But an observer riding in the middle of the moving train will see the strike at the front before the one at the back, or vice versa, depending on the direction of motion. According to relativity, neither observer is wrong. There is no privileged frame of reference. There is no fact of the matter about which events are truly simultaneous. If there is no objective simultaneity, then there is no objective present moment. The present cannot be a single slice of the universe that everyone shares, because different observers slice spacetime differently. Each observer carries their own now, defined by their motion through spacetime. This realization forces a dramatic choice. Either reality itself depends on the observer in a deeply inconsistent way, or the idea that only the present exists must be abandoned. Physics chooses consistency. It abandons the special status of the present. Once the present loses its universal status, the notion of time flowing becomes deeply suspect. Flow implies a moving boundary between past and future, a boundary that sweeps across the universe. But if different observers disagree on where that boundary is, then there is no single boundary to sweep. The flow of time cannot be a physical process happening in the universe, because there is no agreement on what it would be sweeping across. Relativity does not say that time is an illusion. Events still occur, causes still precede effects. But it does say that the division of events into past, present, and future depends on the observer. These categories are not written into spacetime itself. They are ways observers organize events relative to their own motion and information. This has profound implications. Consider an event happening right now on a distant planet. For you, that event might be happening in the present. For someone moving rapidly relative to you, that same event might already be in the past. For someone else, it might still be in the future. If existence depended on being present, then the event would flicker in and out of existence depending on who is observing it. That is impossible. Existence cannot be observer-relative in that way. The only coherent conclusion is that all events exist regardless of how they are classified by different observers. Past, present, and future are not categories of reality. They are categories of description. The absence of a universal now also explains why physics never identifies a special moment. There is no experiment that can detect the present as a physical feature. You cannot build a device that points to now, in an absolute sense. Clocks measure intervals between events, not the movement of the present. All physical laws work without referencing a privileged moment. This is not an oversight, it is a clue. If the present were physically real in a fundamental way, it would show up in the laws of physics. It does not. The present feels real because consciousness is always localized. You are always experiencing events along your own world line at a particular point. That localization creates a powerful sense of immediacy. But immediacy is not universality. The fact that you experience a moment as now does not make it the universe's now. This becomes even clearer when we consider how quickly the present dissolves. The now you feel is incredibly short. Neurological studies suggest that what we call the present is actually an integration window lasting fractions of a second. The brain stitches together sensory information to create a coherent experience. Even within your own mind, the present is not a sharp boundary. It is a blurred construction. Yet we project this construction outward, imagining that the universe itself shares our sense of immediacy. Relativity shows that this projection is wrong. The lack of a universal now also undermines the idea that time flows at a single rate everywhere. If time flowed, it would have to flow with respect to something. But what would that be? Another time, a meta-time. Introducing such a structure leads to infinite regress. Physics avoids this entirely by treating time as a coordinate, not a process. In relativity, different observers do not merely disagree about what is happening now. They also disagree about the order of events that are far apart in space. For events that cannot causally influence each other, The order can flip depending on the observer's motion. This further weakens the idea of an objective temporal ordering imposed by a flowing time. Causality survives because relativity preserves causal structure. Events that can influence each other are always ordered the same way for all observers. Cause always precedes effect. But outside these causal relationships, time ordering is flexible. This flexibility is incompatible with a single, universal present. The universe, in this sense, does not have a master timeline. It has a network of world lines, each with its own local ordering of events. These world lines intersect, influence each other, and form a complex structure, but they do not synchronize into a single cosmic now. This insight also explains why attempts to define the present using cosmology fail. One might hope that the expansion of the universe, or the cosmic background radiation, could define a universal time. But these features only provide a convenient reference frame, not an absolute one. They do not restore a universal present. They simply define a commonly used coordinate system. Coordinates are not reality. They are tools for description. Changing coordinates does not change the universe. The absence of a universal now is not a limitation of our coordinate choices. It is a feature of the universe itself. Emotionally, this idea can feel destabilizing. We rely on the present to anchor meaning. We think of the present as where life happens, where action matters. If there is no universal present, does that undermine significance? In fact, it does the opposite. It shows that significance does not come from occupying a privileged moment. It comes from relationships, causes, and experiences embedded in space-time. Your experiences matter not because they occur in the present, but because they are part of a causal network. They influence other events. They leave traces. They are connected. None of this depends on a universal now. The absence of a universal present also dissolves many metaphysical anxieties. People often fear that time is running out, that the present is slipping away. But slipping away from what? There is no moving boundary that erases moments. Moments are not destroyed when they stop being present. They simply cease to be experienced by you. This reframes urgency. Urgency is psychological, not cosmic. It arises from goals, limitations, and biological constraints. It does not arise from a universe racing forward. The universe is not in a hurry. It is complete. Understanding that there is no universal now also helps explain why the future feels unreal even though physics treats it as real. The future feels unreal because you do not have information about it yet. You do not remember it. You cannot interact with it. But lack of interaction does not imply lack of existence. You also cannot directly interact with distant galaxies right now, but you do not doubt their existence. Temporal distance feels more profound than spatial distance only because of how consciousness works. Relativity puts them on similar footing. Once this is understood, the present becomes something intimate rather than cosmic. It is the moment where your world line intersects your awareness. It is not the center of the universe. It is the center of your experience. This shift can be humbling. It reminds us that human intuition evolved for survival at low speeds and small scales, not for understanding spacetime. The universe does not arrange itself to match our feelings. It obeys deeper principles that often conflict with intuition. The absence of a universal now also reinforces the block universe picture. If there is no objective present, then it makes little sense to say that only the present exists. Existence must be broader than presence. All events must exist regardless of how they are labeled by observers. Relativity does not force us to deny experience. It forces us to reinterpret it. The flow of time, the specialness of now, and the sense of becoming are features of conscious systems embedded in spacetime. They are not features of spacetime itself. Once this distinction is made, the paradoxes surrounding time begin to fade. We stop asking why the present moves, because we realize it does not. We stop asking when the future comes into existence, because we realize it does not need to. What remains is a quieter, more austere picture of reality. A universe without a universal now is not a universe without meaning. It is a universe without favoritism. No moment is elevated above another by cosmic decree. Meaning arises locally where consciousness, causation, and value intersect. The present is real for you because you are there. That is enough. It does not need to be real for the universe as a whole. When the absence of a universal now is fully absorbed, its consequences extend far beyond physics and quietly reach into how we understand identity, responsibility, memory, and even hope. The realization that there is no single present moment shared by the entire universe forces us to confront a subtle but powerful truth. The structure of reality is not organized around human awareness. Instead, human awareness is organized within reality. The idea of a universal now feels natural because our lives are coordinated around shared rhythms. We agree on calendars, clocks, schedules, and deadlines. We meet at the same time. This social coordination gives the illusion of a global present. But this agreement is practical, not fundamental. It works because we move slowly relative to the speed of light and live close together in cosmic terms. Relativity shows that this shared now is a local convenience, not a cosmic fact. Once distances grow large or speeds approach relativistic scales, the illusion breaks. Two astronauts moving differently through space will not agree on which distant events are happening right now. Neither perspective is privileged. The universe does not side with one observer over another. This impartiality is one of the deepest features of modern physics. This impartiality has philosophical weight. It means that reality does not wait for us to catch up. Events do not require our acknowledgement to exist. Something can be real without being present to us. This challenges a deeply human, centered view of existence, where reality seems to orbit our experience. The lack of a universal now also changes how we think about temporal distance. We are comfortable accepting that distant places exist even when we cannot see or reach them, but we struggle with the idea that distant times exist in the same way. The difference is emotional, not logical. Time feels more intimate than space because our consciousness is tied to a specific moment, just as it is tied to a specific place. But relativity treats temporal distance and spatial distance as aspects of the same underlying structure. Spacetime does not care whether two events are far apart in space or in time. What matters are their relationships, especially whether one can influence the other. This symmetry is one of the reasons the block universe picture feels so compelling to physicists. When there is no universal now, the idea of the universe updating itself becomes meaningless. There is no global refresh, no cosmic moment when everything switches from future to present to past. The universe does not need to keep time, it simply has time. This realization dissolves a common but rarely examined assumption that reality must be constantly being renewed. We imagine the present as a fragile knife edge endlessly replacing itself, with the past falling away and the future rushing in. Physics offers no support for this image. There is no evidence of a mechanism that destroys past events or creates future ones on demand. Instead, events exist at their locations in spacetime, permanently. They do not fade when they stop being present. They do not gain reality when they become present. Presence is not a property of events. It is a relationship between events and observers. This reframing can feel unsettling because it undermines the drama of time. We are used to thinking of ourselves as racing against the clock, fighting decay, trying to outrun loss. Without a universal now, the clock loses its cosmic authority. It becomes a tool rather than a judge. This does not mean that deadlines, aging, or mortality cease to matter. They matter because of how systems like bodies, societies, and minds function. But they are not imposed by a universe that is hurrying forward. They are features of particular world lines within a static structure. The absence of a universal now also sheds light on why attempts to ground metaphysical significance in the present always fail. Some philosophies have tried to elevate the present as the only moment that truly exists, the moment of pure being. Relativity quietly dismantles this idea by showing that what counts as present varies from one observer to another. If the present were metaphysically special, its definition could not depend on motion. Yet motion changes what counts as now. This dependence reveals that the present is not a fundamental feature of reality. It is an emergent feature of perspective. This does not diminish the richness of experience. In fact, it highlights how remarkable experience is. Consciousness manages to create a sense of immediacy and flow in a universe that, at the deepest level, lacks both. That is not a failure of reality. It is a triumph of biology. The brain is a machine that constructs a narrative. It strings together sensory input, memory, and expectation into a continuous story. This story requires a present moment to function. Without a sense of now, decision, making and action would collapse. The present is indispensable for life, even if it is not written into space-time. Understanding this distinction helps resolve a common confusion. People often think that if there is no universal now, then nothing is really happening. But happening is a relation between events, not a stamp of presentness. A chemical reaction happens because molecules interact in a certain way. A thought happens because neurons fire in a certain pattern. None of this requires a cosmic now. What disappears is not happening but privileging. No single moment is singled out as the moment when reality truly exists. All moments are equally real. This equality of moments also reframes how we think about beginnings. We often ask when something truly began, as if beginnings mark the moment reality switched on. In spacetime, beginnings are boundaries, not creation points in an ongoing process. The beginning of a life is where a world line starts. The beginning of the universe is where spacetime itself has a boundary or special condition. These beginnings do not require time to have been flowing before them. Similarly, endings do not require time to stop flowing afterward. An ending is where a certain pattern ceases, not where existence collapses. The universe does not mourn endings, it contains them. The absence of a universal now also reshapes our understanding of simultaneity in everyday life. When we say two things are happening at the same time, we usually mean that they are close enough and slow enough relative to each other that relativity's effects are negligible. This approximation works beautifully at human scales, which is why we can live as if a shared present exists. But knowing that this shared present is approximate rather than fundamental adds depth to our understanding. It reminds us that our ordinary picture of the world is a simplified map, not the territory itself. The map is useful, but it is not the final word. This insight encourages intellectual humility. It shows that even concepts that feel self-evident can turn out to be parochial. The universe does not owe us intuitive consistency. It obeys principles that may feel alien, yet are supported by overwhelming evidence. The lack of a universal now also clarifies why physics focuses so heavily on invariants, quantities that do not depend on the observer. Proper time along a world line, for example, is something all observers agree on for a given object. This is the time measured by a clock traveling with that object. It is local, not global. It does not define a universal present. It defines an individual history. Each object carries its own time. This idea feels strange at first, but it aligns perfectly with relativity. There is no master clock. There are only local clocks, each ticking along its own path through space-time. This local nature of time reinforces the idea that the present is not a slice of the universe, but a feature of a particular world line. Your present is where you are. Someone else's present is where they are. There is no conflict because neither claims to define reality as a whole. Once this is accepted, many philosophical puzzles lose their urgency. We stop worrying about where the present goes when it passes, because it does not pass. We stop worrying about when the future becomes real, because it does not need to become real. We stop worrying about the past being annihilated, because it is not annihilated. What remains is a universe that is structurally complete and experientially rich. Completeness belongs to reality. Richness belongs to experience. Confusing the two creates paradoxes. Separating them resolves those paradoxes. The absence of a universal now also offers a different way to think about hope. Hope is often framed as something directed toward a future that does not yet exist. In the block universe, Hope is not about bringing something into existence. It is about orientation toward unknown parts of an existing structure. You hope because you do not know what lies ahead, not because what lies ahead is unreal. This preserves the emotional power of hope while grounding it in a realistic picture of the world. Hope is about uncertainty and value, not about creation ex nihilo. Similarly, regret is not about wishing to change something that has vanished. It is about evaluating relationships between different parts of your world line. The events you regret are still there. Regret arises because you stand at one point in spacetime and judge another. Understanding this does not erase regret, but it reframes it. It shifts regret from a battle against time to a dialogue with structure. In the end, the absence of a universal now is not a bleak conclusion. It is a clarifying one. It tells us that the universe is not centered on our moment, our speed, or our perspective. It is larger, more impartial, and more stable than our intuitions suggest. We live inside that universe, constructing a sense of now because we must. That sense is real for us, essential for action and meaning, but it is not the universe's sense. The universe does not mark time, it contains it. And in recognizing this, we gain a deeper appreciation for both sides of existence, the vast, timeless structure that physics reveals, and the fragile, fleeting experience that makes being human what it is. The feeling that we are moving through time is one of the most convincing experiences we have. It feels immediate, undeniable, and constant. We wake up, the day unfolds, memories accumulate, and the past seems to recede behind us while the future approaches. This sensation is so powerful that we rarely question it. Yet, when examined carefully, this feeling turns out not to be a feature of time itself, but a feature of the human mind. The motion through time is psychological, not physical. At the level of fundamental physics, nothing is moving from past to future. Events are ordered, not pushed. What moves is our awareness. Consciousness is not spread across all moments at once, it is localized. It experiences events sequentially along a specific path in spacetime, and that sequence is interpreted as motion. The mind mistakes its own processing order for a property of the universe. The brain is a biological system designed to operate in sequences. Neurons fire, signals propagate, and chemical changes occur in ordered chains. Each brain state depends on previous brain states. This dependence creates a direction. Because one mental state contains information about earlier states but not later ones, the brain naturally constructs a story with a beginning, a middle, and an anticipated continuation. That story is what we call the passage of time. Memory is central to this illusion. We remember earlier experiences but not future ones. This asymmetry alone is enough to generate a strong sense of flow. If you remembered tomorrow as clearly as yesterday, the distinction between past and future would collapse. Time would feel laid out rather than moving. The fact that memory points in only one direction anchors consciousness to a perceived present and creates the sense that we are leaving something behind. This is closely tied to how the brain records information. Memories are physical traces, changes in neural connections caused by prior events. These traces accumulate in one direction because of the way entropy works in physical systems. Disorder increases, leaving records behind. The brain exploits this asymmetry to learn and predict. But the direction of memory does not imply that time itself is flowing. It implies that information storage is directional. The present moment, which feels so sharp and special, is also a mental construction. Neuroscience shows that the brain does not experience an instant. What we call no is an integration window lasting a fraction of a second, during which sensory input is combined into a coherent experience. The brain smooths over delays and gaps, creating the illusion of a continuous moment. This manufactured present is then treated as if it were a fundamental feature of reality. The feeling of speed through time also changes depending on mental state, which is another clue that it is psychological. Time feels slow during fear or boredom and fast during joy or absorption. If time itself were flowing, its rate would not depend on attention, emotion, or age. but our experience of duration stretches and compresses because it is generated by the brain's internal processing, not by an external temporal current. Even aging contributes to this illusion. As we grow older, fewer experiences are novel, and the brain records fewer new details. With fewer memory markers, periods of life seem to pass more quickly in retrospect. This does not mean time has accelerated. It means memory density has changed. The passage we feel is a comparison between remembered states, not a measurement of time's motion. Expectation also plays a role. The brain constantly predicts what will happen next. When predictions are confirmed, time seems to flow smoothly. When predictions fail, time feels disrupted or slowed. This predictive processing reinforces the sense of moving toward the future. But again, this is an internal narrative, not a property of spacetime. Importantly, none of this denies that events are ordered. Order exists. Causes precede effects along world lines. What disappears is the idea that order requires motion. A list can be ordered without being read. A film reel contains a sequence without being projected. The sequence exists whether or not it is being experienced. The brain's experience of sequence does not create the sequence, it reveals it locally. The illusion of motion through time is similar to the illusion of motion in cinema. A movie screen displays a rapid sequence of still frames. The frames do not move, but the brain interprets the sequence as continuous motion. In the same way, spacetime contains a sequence of events. The brain experiences them one after another and interprets this as time flowing. This illusion is not a mistake in the sense of an error. It is an adaptation. A creature that did not experience time as flowing would struggle to act, plan, or survive. The sense of passage allows prioritization, urgency, learning, and coordination. It is useful precisely because it compresses complex structure into an intuitive story. Understanding this does not weaken experience, it explains it. The feeling that time passes is real as a feeling. What it is not is a measurement of reality's behavior. Reality does not need to move for experience to feel dynamic. This realization can be deeply unsettling because it removes a familiar anchor. We often define ourselves by where we are in time, as if we are carried forward by it. But in a deeper sense, we are patterns extended across time. The feeling of moving is the feeling of becoming aware of different parts of that pattern. Once this is seen, urgency becomes psychological rather than cosmic. The universe is not pushing us forward. The pressure we feel comes from goals, bodies, and minds with limits. Time does not chase us. Our own biology does. This perspective can also bring calm. If the motion through time is a feature of consciousness, not a force acting on us, then nothing is being stolen from existence. Moments are not erased. They remain part of the structure. What changes is only what we are aware of. The passage of time, then, is not something happening to the universe. It is something happening in the mind. And recognizing this does not detach us from life. It places life exactly where it belongs as an experience unfolding within a reality that is far more stable, complete, and silent than it appears. Causality is often imagined as something carried forward by the flow of time, as if causes push effects into existence as time moves. We picture the present advancing, dragging consequences behind it. But once the idea of a flowing present is removed, causality does not disappear, it becomes clearer. Causes and effects are not linked by a moving now. They are linked by structure. In a spacetime view of reality, causality is a relationship between events, not a process unfolding in time. One event causes another because of how they are positioned and connected within spacetime, not because time flows from one to the other. The ordering exists whether or not anyone experiences it. Time does not need to pass for cause and effect to be real. Physics expresses causality through constraints. Signals cannot travel faster than light. Events can only influence other events within their future light cone. These constraints define which events can affect which others. This causal structure is fixed. It does not depend on a present moment sweeping forward. It depends on geometry. This is why relativity preserves causality even while eliminating a universal now. Even though different observers disagree about simultaneity, they always agree about causal order. If one event can influence another, all observers will agree on which came first. Cause always precedes effect in this sense. The absence of a universal present does not undermine causality, it clarifies it. In everyday thinking, we often confuse temporal order with causation. Just because one event happens before another does not mean it caused it. Causation requires a connection, a mechanism, not just sequence. The spacetime view emphasizes this distinction. It treats causation as a network of connections embedded in the structure of reality. This network does not need time to flow. A map does not need to move for roads to connect cities. The connections exist regardless of whether anyone is traveling. Similarly, causal connections exist regardless of whether the present is moving. The idea of a flowing present can actually obscure causality by encouraging magical thinking. It tempts us to imagine that events are somehow brought into existence by the arrival of now. In reality, events exist at their locations and are connected by laws. Nothing waits for the present to arrive in order to happen. This becomes especially clear in physics experiments. When a particle decays, it does not wait for time to push it into decaying. The decay is a relation between states described by probability amplitudes and physical laws. The decay happens at a particular time coordinate, not because time arrived there, but because that is how the system is structured. Even probabilistic events fit this picture. Randomness does not require a flowing time. It requires a lack of determinism in the laws connecting events. A probabilistic outcome can exist as part of spacetime just as easily as a deterministic one. The uncertainty lies in what observers can predict, not in whether the event exists. This distinction is crucial for understanding how causality and free action coexist. If causality required a moving present, then removing the flow of time might seem to freeze everything. But causality does not depend on flow, it depends on relations. Actions cause effects because of how they are embedded in spacetime, not because time carries them forward. This also helps resolve confusion about intervention and change. We often say that we change the future by acting in the present. In spacetime terms, this means that different events are connected along different world lines, depending on what actions occur. The future includes those actions. It is not a blank space waiting to be filled. The idea that the future already exists does not mean that causes are ineffective. It means that causes are already part of the structure. When you decide to act, that decision is not something outside the future altering it. It is something inside the future helping to define it. Causality without a moving present also explains why prediction is possible. We can predict outcomes because the structure of connections is stable. The laws of physics do not change as time passes. They apply across spacetime. This stability would be impossible if reality were being continuously recreated. In everyday life, we rely on causality constantly. We expect actions to have consequences. This expectation does not require belief in a flowing time. It requires belief in consistent connections. The spacetime view preserves this consistency more cleanly than the intuitive picture of time pushing events along. This perspective also clarifies moral responsibility. Responsibility depends on whether actions cause outcomes, not on whether time flows. If an action leads to harm, it does so because of causal connections. These connections remain intact in a static spacetime. Removing the flow of time does not remove accountability. In fact, the absence of flow can strengthen responsibility. Actions are not fleeting sparks that vanish as time moves on. They are fixed parts of reality. What you do is permanently embedded in spacetime. It does not disappear when the present passes. Causality also gives meaning to learning. We learn because past events influence future states of our brains. Memory formation is a causal process. The brain's structure changes because of previous experiences. This does not require time to move. It requires ordered connections between states. Even intention fits into this framework. Intention is a brain state that causally influences later actions. It is not a ghostly force pushing events forward in time. It is a physical pattern embedded in spacetime that connects earlier and later states along a world line. The idea of causality without flow can feel abstract, but it aligns perfectly with how science actually works. Scientists do not ask how time pushes experiments forward. They ask how variables relate, how one state leads to another. They model relationships, not passage. Once this is understood, the universe no longer looks like a machine being wound forward by time. It looks like a network of events connected by laws. The order exists. The connections exist. Nothing needs to move for those connections to hold. This view also dissolves the fear that if time does not flow, nothing can change. Change is simply difference between states at different times. Those differences are built into spacetime. They do not require a dynamic present to generate them. In the end, causality is not carried by time like a current carries debris. Causality is written into the geometry of reality. Causes and effects coexist as parts of a structured whole, linked by laws that do not depend on a ticking clock. Time does not make things happen. Things happen because of how reality is arranged, and that arrangement is stable, ordered, and fully capable of supporting cause, effect, action, and meaning without any need for time to flow at all. Free will seems to clash directly with the idea of a fixed spacetime structure. If past, present, and future all coexist, if every event already has its place, then it feels natural to ask where choice fits in. We imagine free will as something that requires openness, as if the future must be empty until we decide what to do. When the universe is described as a complete block, this image breaks down, and with it comes a deep anxiety. If the future already exists, are our choices real or only an illusion? This anxiety arises from a misunderstanding of what fixed means in the context of spacetime. A fixed structure does not mean an imposed script written independently of us. It means that all events, including deliberation, hesitation, intention, and decision, are part of the structure. The block universe does not remove choice, it contains it. In everyday thinking, we imagine the future as something outside us, something waiting to be shaped by our actions. In the spacetime view, the future is not outside us, it includes us. It includes the moments where we think, doubt, change our minds, and act. There is no version of the future in which those processes are missing. To say the future exists is not to say it exists without you. Free will does not require the future to be unreal. It requires that actions flow from internal states such as beliefs, desires, values, and reasoning. When you choose, you are not creating a future out of nothing. You are expressing a particular configuration of your brain, shaped by genetics, experience, and context. That configuration causally influences what happens next along your world line. This causal influence is fully compatible with a fixed spacetime structure. The confusion often comes from imagining choice as something that floats above physics, stepping in from outside spacetime to alter it. But human choice has never worked that way. Choices are physical processes. They involve neurons firing, information being processed, and alternatives being evaluated. These processes take time, occur at specific locations in spacetime, and have consequences. They are events like any other. In the block universe, these events are not overridden or bypassed. They are included. The fact that they are included does not make them powerless. A decision can be both inevitable in hindsight and genuinely chosen in the moment. These two descriptions are not contradictory, they apply from different perspectives. From the inside perspective, you experience uncertainty. You do not know what you will choose until you choose it. You feel options, weigh reasons, and act. This uncertainty is real. It guides behavior and gives meaning to effort. From the outside perspective, the entire sequence exists as a pattern. The decision is part of that pattern. The existence of the pattern does not eliminate the experience of choosing within it. An analogy can help clarify this. Imagine watching a recorded chess game. From the outside, every move is fixed. The outcome is known. But from the perspective of the players during the game, each move involved real choice, strategy, and uncertainty. The existence of the complete game does not mean the players were not choosing when they played. It only means that the game, once played, exists as a whole. Your life is similar. From a spacetime perspective, it is a complete pattern. From your perspective, it is lived move by move. Free will operates at the level of lived experience and causal agency, not at the level of cosmic openness. Another source of confusion is the idea that free will requires the ability to do otherwise in an absolute sense. People often say that to be free, you must have been able to choose a different outcome under exactly the same conditions. But this requirement is problematic even without the block universe. If all conditions, including your mental state, were identical, why would you choose differently? Randomness does not create freedom, it replaces agency with chance. What matters for free will is not metaphysical indeterminacy, but ownership. A choice is free if it arises from who you are, from your values and reasoning, rather than from external coercion. This kind of freedom survives intact in a fixed spacetime structure. Your choices are still yours because they are expressions of you. The block universe actually strengthens this idea of ownership. Since your decisions are permanently part of reality, they are not fleeting moments washed away by time. They are defining features of your worldline. Who you are is not just who you are now, but the entire pattern of decisions you make across your life. This perspective also dissolves the fear that the future forces the present. The future does not reach backward and constrain you. Causation still runs locally along world lines. Your present state influences your future states, not the other way around. The fact that those future states already exist does not mean they are causing the present. Existence is not causation. In spacetime, earlier events explain later ones, even though all events coexist. A mountain exists all at once, but its base does not cause its peak. Causation is about structure and dependency, not about temporal existence. In the same way, future events do not cause present decisions simply because they exist. Understanding this removes a subtle but powerful illusion, the idea that if the future exists, it must be exerting control. Control does not come from existence. It comes from causal influence, and causal influence in physics always respects local ordering. The block universe does not reverse causation. This also has implications for responsibility. If your actions are part of the fixed structure of reality, then they are not erased or softened by the passage of time. Responsibility does not fade because time moves on. What you do remains a permanent feature of the world. This permanence gives weight to action rather than stripping it away. At the same time, this view encourages compassion. Since people's actions arise from complex chains of causes, understanding behavior means understanding structure, not condemning individuals as uncaused originators. Responsibility and understanding are not opposites. They are complementary. The block universe also reframes regret. Regret often involves wishing the past could be changed, as if time might flow backward. In a fixed spacetime, the past is not changeable, but neither is it gone. Regret becomes an evaluation of relationships between different parts of your worldline, not a battle against time. This can soften regret without denying its emotional reality. Hope, too, survives. Hope is not about creating the future from nothing. It is about orientation toward unknown parts of an existing structure. You hope because you do not know what lies ahead and because you care about outcomes. Hope motivates action, and those actions are part of the future you hope for. In this way, free will, responsibility, regret, and hope all fit naturally within a fixed spacetime structure. They do not require time to be open or flowing. They require agents embedded in causal networks, capable of processing information and acting on reasons. The idea that the future already exists does not turn humans into puppets. It turns them into authors whose stories are already written in the book of spacetime, but written by them. The writing and the written are not separate. They are the same process viewed from different angles. Free will, then, is not threatened by a fixed universe. It is misunderstood by a misleading picture of time. Once that picture is corrected, choice does not disappear. It takes its proper place as a real, causal, meaningful feature of a universe that does not need to unfold in order for life to matter. When the idea that the future already exists and time does not truly pass is taken to its final implications, it reaches beyond physics and philosophy and touches the way we live, fear, choose, and find meaning. This view does not remain an abstract model of space-time. It quietly reshapes our relationship with life itself. The most profound change it brings is not intellectual, but emotional. One of the deepest human fears is the sense that time is running out. We feel pursued by aging, haunted by deadlines, and pressured by the idea that moments are constantly slipping away. This fear is built on the image of time as a force moving forward, carrying us toward loss. When that image dissolves, the fear changes its shape. Nothing is chasing us. Nothing is being erased by a passing present. What we feel as loss is not destruction, but distance. In a universe where all moments coexist, experiences are not fragile sparks that vanish when the present moves on. They are permanent features of reality. A joyful moment does not cease to exist when it ends. A meaningful conversation is not swallowed by time. These moments remain exactly where they are in space-time, as real as ever. What changes is only our access to them. This reframing can soften grief. Grief is unavoidable because it arises from the structure of experience. We cannot access all moments at once. We cannot return to earlier parts of our world line. But grief often carries an extra layer of pain, the sense that what mattered has been annihilated. The space-time view removes this layer. What mattered still exists. It is not gone. It is elsewhere. The same applies to love. Love is often felt as something threatened by time. We fear losing it, watching it fade, or seeing it replaced by change. In a universe without temporal erasure, love is not undone by time. Every act of care, every shared experience, remains part of reality forever. The end of a relationship marks the boundary of a pattern, not the deletion of what came before. This does not deny change or endings. It simply changes what endings mean. An ending is not a disappearance into nothingness. It is a place where something stops extending. The meaning of what happened does not depend on its continuation. The absence of a flowing time also transforms how we think about regret. Regret often feels like being trapped by time, wishing we could go back and undo something that is gone forever. In a fixed space-time, the past is not undoable, but it is also not erased. Regret becomes a form of self-understanding rather than a battle against time. It is a way of evaluating who we were from the standpoint of who we are now. This perspective encourages growth without self-torture. You cannot change what exists, but you can change how later parts of your world line unfold. Regret informs action. It does not demand impossible reversals. Fear of the future also changes. The future often feels like an approaching wave, full of threat and uncertainty. But if time does not flow, the future is not moving toward us. We are not standing still while it rushes in. The future is simply a region of space-time we have not experienced yet. Fear then becomes a response to uncertainty, not to an advancing force. This distinction matters. Uncertainty can be met with curiosity, preparation, and courage. A rushing future feels overwhelming. A landscape ahead invites exploration. The block universe replaces panic with orientation. Meaning itself is often tied to becoming. We think life matters because it is unfolding, because it is happening now. If everything already exists, does meaning dissolve? In fact, meaning becomes more secure. Meaning does not depend on fragility. It depends on relationships, values, and impact. These do not vanish when time stops flowing. A completed novel does not lose its meaning because all its pages exist. A symphony does not lose its power because the score is written. Meaning is not created by incompleteness. It is created by structure. The universe, like a finished work, can be whole and meaningful at the same time. This view also reframes success and failure. We often imagine success as moving forward in time and failure as falling behind. In space-time, there is no behind or ahead in an absolute sense. There are only different regions with different properties. Success and failure become evaluations of patterns, not positions in a race. This can reduce the toxic pressure of comparison. You are not late to life. You are not falling behind a cosmic schedule. There is no universal timeline you are failing to meet. There is only your world line, unfolding according to its own structure. The absence of a flowing time also changes how we think about purpose. Purpose is often imagined as something we move toward, something waiting in the future. In the space-time view, purpose is something expressed across time, not reached at a single point. It is visible in patterns of action, not in final destinations. This encourages a shift from outcome obsession to pattern awareness. What matters is not where you end up, but the shape of your path. Kindness, curiosity, courage, and integrity are not means to a future moment. They are features of a world line. This perspective can also bring a sense of peace about mortality. Death is often feared as a future moment that will erase us. In space-time, death marks the end of a world line, not the erasure of its existence. A life is not undone by its end, it remains a complete structure fully real. This does not eliminate fear or sadness. Those emotions are part of being human, but it removes the idea that death is a theft of existence. It is a boundary, not an annihilation. Understanding this can deepen gratitude. If moments are not lost, then gratitude is not a desperate attempt to hold on to something fleeting. It is an acknowledgement of something that exists permanently. You are not grateful because the moment will vanish. You are grateful because it is real. The same applies to forgiveness. Forgiveness is often seen as letting go of the past. In space-time, the past does not go anywhere. Forgiveness becomes a change in how later parts of your world line relate to earlier ones. It is a reconfiguration of meaning, not an erasure. The final shift this view invites is humility. We are not at the center of time. Our moment is not privileged. The universe does not revolve around our now. And yet, our experience still matters, precisely because it is part of the structure. We do not need time to flow for life to be precious. Life is precious because it is structured, connected, and experienced from the inside. The future already exists, but that does not make the present empty. It makes it located. Time does not pass, but meaning does not depend on passage. Meaning depends on being part of something larger, something coherent. In recognizing this, fear loosens its grip, urgency becomes more honest, and choice becomes quieter but deeper. The universe does not hurry, and in learning to see that, we may learn to hurry less ourselves, without caring any less about how we live.